The content was pure gold. Only 20 people attended live. I thought you just picked a topic that doesn't interest people. I said, okay, who cares? I posted about this webinar and the engagement went through the roof. This was my most successful post, and I have no explanation for this.
Welcome to the the stories of founders and marketers who created communities around their company's products or services. And for our very first episode, we have as our guest Akash, who is the CEO of Airtime. And he has built a community of product researchers um, around his product Airtime. And so, I guess without further ado, Akash, can you introduce yourself and tell us about Airtime?
Absolutely. Sam, it's my pleasure to be chatting with you and be the first guest. It's an honor. A few words about myself. I'm Akash, the CEO of Airtime. I'm one of the two co-founders. My dear co-founder, technical co-founder, is Marton. Um, Airtime, like to call it, I always iterate on the one-liner with Airtime, but the latest one is that's the zero-effort research repository, where all you need to do is upload your research recordings, be it product research, market research, or expert calls, for instance. And by asking questions, you can extract insights on demand in a matter of seconds. In terms of background, I built 5 financial products and investment platforms before starting Airtime in Germany and Berlin. And prior to that, I was for 5 years at Roland Berger, which is a European strategy consultancy. So I had my fair share of consultancy world, and in the last 10 plus years, the startup world.
Awesome. And so, for the audience, can you give us an idea of like who uses Airtime? Like who is the target customer?
So target customers are teams which do a large volume of research calls. And by research calls, I mean these are standardized calls with a standardized set of interview questions that people do to explore a market, explore customer needs, or explore trends in the world. Typical customers that Airtime has are software teams, tech companies from around the globe. When you think about typical product discovery process, it involves talking to your customers all the time to understand and prioritize their problems, and at the same time also validate potential solutions that you want to present them before building is the most expensive way of validating. So talking to them is a better alternative. So this is that one kind of companies. We also have design agencies and market research companies, and I'm going to put them in the same bucket because they work on behalf of their clients and they conduct specific projects to either build an MVP or to explore customer and user needs. And just very lately, it looks like we're also going to get a university as a client, market research department at the university.
Interesting. That's unexpected.
It's it was unexpected, but I was so happy.
Like, how did you find that? I'm just curious. Like, did you find just a new trend of folks at universities like starting to look at the platform? How did you find that trend?
So like many of the things as it sort of happened to me in the last 2 years. I consistently invested a lot of time in producing genuine, own, and hopefully valuable content for my target audiences. So this content spirals through LinkedIn, Slack, and it just so happened that an acquaintance of mine has been following me. And when I had a chat with her, she said, "Oh my God, Akash, I know someone that you should be talking to." And she connected me with one of the faculty members. We set up the meeting, and then we had like I think 3 meetings within 7 days, and I'm very hopeful this is going to develop into a fruitful cooperation.
That's fantastic. I think that speaks to the power of community and building content. Can you tell me, or tell us rather, about right now? How big is, I guess, Airtime's community? How many people, kind of regularly watch the content that you put out? Like, Where's the community? How big is it? Are they on LinkedIn? Which platforms do you interact with community members on?
There are different KPIs we can look at here. One of the best ones for me are the newsletter subscribers and people who've been to my webinar and been constantly coming back. So now I have over 11,000 subscribers. These are people who have all either attended a webinar or registered to at least one one webinar. The second part of the community is looser. It's my LinkedIn circle and the people who are following me on LinkedIn or engaging with me or direct connections. So that's and I can even go to like second degree connections. And in terms of followers and first degree connections, it's somewhere around 5,000-6,000 people. And then in the second degree connection, I reach a lot wider audiences globally, and I see a lot of times when I post or when I publish a new event, a new webinar, that at least 30 or 40% of the engagement it comes from these second degree connections.
And so, just for concrete details for the audience, you have a newsletter, and then you also do webinars. Can you tell us about like the main kind of community building activities or audience building activities that you regularly do for Airtime?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think let's go through the workflow quickly, and I try not to bore anyone here, but it's important to get the whole picture. So the first step of building the community is that I have a principle. And this is it's plagiarized. It's not my principle. Techstars is one of our investors, and Techstars' principle is to give first. I really like this phrase, and this is something that I live by when I produce content. And what I mean by giving first is that the first thing I do, I'm not going anywhere out in the world and asking people to join a community, try Airtime, or do something. But what I do is I reach out to product and user research leaders at sometimes top tier companies, sometimes interesting companies which are not that well known, but people who I believe have something very valuable to share with the product and research communities. I set up and organize a webinar with them, and then when I through the for this webinar I do some promotion. So part of the community building starts with the promotion part. I post about my webinar on my LinkedIn. I create a LinkedIn event. I also create it on Eventbrite, ADP list. So a few platforms where I believe that the people who could be one day an Airtime customer are mingling and are looking around for inspiration and content. Now, for a regular webinar, I get somewhere around 200 to 300 registrants. Sometimes 400 or 500 when it's something like when it goes through the roof. Now, afterwards, after the webinar, what I do is that I take the webinar content and just think about it. So it's 4 to 5 minute discussion. It's actually an endless treasure chest of punchlines and insights that one could produce from a single webinar. So you don't have to produce a webinar every week. It's like once a month is more than enough to produce ample content. And I take these webinars and I repurpose them. And what I do is that I have a format where I post like a short wisdom. If you have 20 seconds attention span and you just want to learn one thing about this webinar, you read my post. It's a couple of hundred characters, maybe a funny meme around that or a photo. That's it. You have 2 minutes attention span. I have a highlight reel for you. I produce a highlight reel with my 3 main learnings from this webinar. If you have 5 minutes attention span, I write a short article. I publish it on Medium and I publish it on my blog. And then I take these repurposed contents and spread it through my newsletter, LinkedIn, and Slack. And primarily, LinkedIn is the channel which triggers discussion and the back and forth between the people who registered or are curious, registered to my event or are curious about it.
Wonderful. So I've actually watched some of the those clips and read some of the posts. So it does work, right? It is hard to find time for like the 30-minute thing, but the repurposed content does come in bite-sized enough chunks that you can get that. Um, you know, again, for if you have like 2 minutes of attention span, and I guess putting everything in context. So you put out a lot of content now, and you actually mentioned one specific case of a potential customer who came in because you were putting out content. Can you give us an idea of um, how many airtime customers in general come in through these kind of content and audience and community building activities?
I'm going to answer your question, so I'm not evading that. But what I do want to say that this is not performance marketing. It's not that you create a webinar, you send out a newsletter, and you expect people to sign up immediately and become a loyal airtime customer, spreading the word that this is the best platform ever. The way I think about webinars is the way I think about the IKEA brochure. Like IKEA publishes every quarter a paper brochure, which a lot of times they mail it to you. And it's sitting on somewhere on a table. You're not doing anything with it, right? But when you start thinking, oh, I need something like a piece of furniture for my kids, what's going to happen? You're going to look at the table, you'll be reminded of IKEA, you have a look, you get a trigger, and then you go to IKEA on the weekend. So think of webinars as a brochure, which like every now and then people you're visible to people. And whenever they're in a moment in their work that they face a pain point that your product solves, then you're going to be in this top two, three choices that they're thinking about. Nobody's going to do a big scan of the internet of all the possible solutions that are out there. We're all using shortcuts here. So this is this is the background or the philosophy around webinars and how people convert. So it typically takes multiple touch points with people until they create an account. I would say like in August, just from webinars alone, we had 20 plus signups for airtime and also upgrading paying customers.
That's amazing. I especially like the IKEA analogy. I guess you have to understand, like, your product is only one part of your customers' day to day, and there's a time and place for which your product is the right solution for the problem they have at that moment. But the chances of your ad or whatnot, or your direct, cold email reaching them at just the moment that they have that exact problem is very, very small. Like, I remember when I got when at IKEA, I specifically bought a fridge at some point, and then on Facebook, I started seeing Facebook ads for fridges, and it's like I just bought the fridge.
It's too late.
It's
It's
too
too
late.
late.
It's too
There's no
late.
second fridge.
There's no exactly right. I love that example. Man, that's wonderful. Okay, and so I think again the goal of this podcast is to give an idea of people who are interested in starting to do these kinds of activities, about how to get started, and we've gotten through like the current state, but
Yeah.
presumably it won't be the end state of airtime, presumably, and if we circle back to this in 3 years, you'll everything is just bigger, better, greater. But rewind if you can for us, when you just got started doing this stuff, kind of where was airtime along its journey? Like, how long had you been working in airtime before you decided to start putting out content, and how did you get started with like the first webinar?
When I made my first webinar, we had a prototype and a beta community of 10 testers. We like literally had nothing, nothing. I mean, we had a lot of ambition and a lot of ideas and a lot of energy, but it's not that we had a functioning product. So I started early on because what you have to realize with content it's that it's a long term game. It's like a snowball. I told you it was like last month. It brought us 20 new signups. Well, I don't like I pay zero performance marketing, and it's only taking like a fraction of my time, and I see it as a snowball. Like beginning of the year, it was just a few people, but you see this slope as your content also spirals and just propagates through the internet. So my recommendation to anyone who's thinking about it is not don't wait. You can start if you have a product in mind. It means you have some unique insights about a user problem, about an industry. If you have that, well, chances are people are curious about it. So share it and start sharing it. And you don't have to do it big time. I think you don't have to post 10 times a week on X or on LinkedIn. But whatever you do, do it consistently. If it's just 2 posts a week, it's 2 posts a week, but make it 2 posts every week.
So, when you started um, your first webinar, did you from day one start like sending messages to the kinds of people you wanted to interview as guests? Like, did you just, you know, cold message folks on LinkedIn? Like, how did you recruit those first guests?
So back in the days, I was really shy. I thought like, who, like nobody knows Akash. Why would anyone answer me? And who am I to reach out to XYZ? So the first few guests, I think the first 3, 4 guests and the first 3, 4 webinars that I hosted, I reached out to people from my network, people either like angel investors of ours, um, ex colleagues, people that I got connected with through friends. So some people that I got a warm introduction to. And I think this was a good starting point because I felt shy. I still didn't need to worry about rejection. There's a lot of legitimate reasons why people reject, and also like up until these days, it happens to me that I'd like to really have someone on my webinar and on my show, and they say no, and I see them popping up in other webinars. Well, that's life. Some people like Nike, others like Adidas. Like, what can I do? You take that. But over the course of 2 years, I built a lot of confidence, and I'm quite self-assured in a sense of knowing the worth and the value that I'm bringing to my audience and how professional I am, what I'm doing. So, for anyone thinking about getting started, I think if you have a network that you can tap into, where it doesn't have to be best friends and buddies, but at least if you have someone who can introduce you to a person who's someone interesting, that's very helpful. One more thing that I'd like to add here early on, and this was something lucky that happened to me. I didn't plan for it, and I wasn't conscious about it. But there's something very trivial about webinars and podcasts. When you have a guest who comes from a top tier company, you have a guest from Spotify, you have a guest from Booking.com or Wise, just naming some of the guests that I had in the past month. But my point is, as soon as you have the first one from a renowned company, it becomes a lot easier to reach out other ones, because all of a sudden, first of all, they're not the first, and then all of a sudden everybody wants to be part of this group, and they look at your past lineup and they say, oh my god, you had all these people, yeah, of course I want to be part of that. So try to early on, when once you exploited your network in the first 2, 3 sessions, try to get someone from a renowned company with a wider reach, because it will help. It will make it a lot easier to secure future guests.
Awesome. That's actually super helpful. I'll be transparent in that I am learning to do exactly what you've already done. Part of the goal of this podcast was I don't know how to build a community and I want to build a community. So I'm reaching out through my own network. But I think that's great advice actionable advice that I can take as well as some of the folks that may be watching this. And then on the other side, so there's the guests, and then there's the audience, right? How did you recruit the first audience to watch the first webinars? Did you send things on LinkedIn? Was it just your own networks? Did you do any promotion on Eventbrite back then? How did you promote it?
That's a good question. I didn't have a newsletter back then, so I use Eventbrite for the very first webinars. I didn't pay, so I didn't do paid promotion for my webinars. What I did was on LinkedIn, I posted about the webinars. I tagged my guests, and then I also sent my guests an email saying that, hey, I posted about our webinar. Please like it. Please leave a comment with at least 9 words, like a legitimate content, not just, hey, great to be there or something along those lines, but something substantial. I also included in this email a thumbnail that they can use if they have their own newsletter, or if they have their own blog, and they want to create a short post. And this is like an asset, a visual asset that they can use. That makes it very easy for them. All they need to do is just come up with a copy, which they can also take from my LinkedIn post. So the seed and the core was a single LinkedIn post, and then I built on this to sort of piggyback on the network of my guests, who were a lot bigger people than me, bigger in a sense of having already built a larger network on LinkedIn and a larger followership.
That's amazing. Well, I think that's good advice in general. Um, Obviously, you have your own network and you can get started there, but then those guests would help you be able to expand your reach going forward. Um, and Yeah, something for me to try as well. Um, I guess now something that I think a lot of people might be interested in is, were there any things you tried when it comes to building an audience and building a community that didn't work? Failed experiments, channels that just didn't work out. Yeah, mistakes in the process.
There's a mistake I keep doing again and again. And that mistake is doing webinars on the road. Every time I'm not in my room, and with my setting, something goes wrong. It's either the internet, the audio quality. There was this time, I tell you, this is crazy. So I'm in a co-working office, high speed internet, fine, it's great. I have the ear pods with like the Apple ear pods, and I'm sitting in a very small room. And you know what happened? In a very small room, my voice echoed, and the AirPods, they filtered out the echo and they filtered out my own voice, so the audience could hardly hear what I was saying. And when this happens, you like start to sweat, and you like your pulse and your blood pressure just goes through the roof. It affects your performance, and it's also not a great experience for the audience. So one of my recommend, and I know there's a lot of digital nomads, and luckily we live at an age where we can travel a lot, but I think a lot of times I've been way too relaxed about doing my webinars from a remote place and not from my mini studio here. So this is something like a failure that I had. A second one, and this is counterintuitive. Maybe you have an answer for this. I've tried over and over again to ask my community, primarily in newsletters, about topics and companies they're interested in. What do they want to learn about? I I sent out a survey a few months ago. I tell you how many answers I got. Like zero. Nobody answered.
Thousands of people and no one answered.
And they're active, man. I know that a lot of people from that subscribe. It's not a dead subscriber list. I know it's active. I see that they're opening the newsletter. I see that they click. I see that they consume the content. Maybe it was the format that I chose. Maybe the survey was too long. I'm not saying that in general surveys don't work, But for me, if I have to pick a personal failure, I definitely failed at getting getting feedback on what content would be valuable for my listeners.
That's good to know. And it's interesting in general, coming from like a product perspective of the why. Um, I guess having experience with product, and I'm assuming that you have the same experience. People are strange in some ways where there's unpredictable behavior, and that I can't explain myself. And maybe that's just one of those things. Like some people might have time, not they feel like they don't have time to respond to like a 2 minute survey, but
Yeah,
then they make time for 30 minutes or an hour or somewhere else. It's hard to predict.
yeah, and you don't like maybe they don't know they but when they see it, they feel like joining. There's you haven't asked about, but there's this one story I need to share with you. So
Absolutely.
also about webinars. So there was I had an extraordinary guest earlier this year in one of the webinars, and the webinar itself, it was extremely fascinating. Like I loved it. The content was pure gold. It was really difficult for me to find people for this webinar, and only about 20 people attended live. Bad. That's bad for me. Like I aim for a lot higher, like 80 plus, 100 plus attending. I thought like, Akos, you just picked a topic that doesn't interest people. Like that's it. I said, okay, who cares? I still make my highlight reel. I just follow through my process. I posted about this webinar, and this was my most successful post in terms of impression and engagement. And I have no explanation for this. How can it be that one of my most fascinating and insightful webinars was hardly attended by anyone, but when I posted about it, that's the engagement went through the roof, and it seemed to fascinate and inspire a lot of people. Even if a webinar attracts low attention, that's not the end game. The end game is to repurpose it because that will give you a really, really wide reach.
Absolutely. Wow, that's your best performing post came from one of your worst performing
For
webinars.
the worst performing webinar, yes.
Oh my god, that's wild. Um, Okay, and then I think so now going into our audience, I imagine that there are founders who are starting startups right now who are figuring out how to just build everything from scratch. And one of the things that may be on their mind is potentially maybe I could build my own community. Do you have any words or thoughts for someone who I don't know, they just have an early product or they're building it and they're trying to figure out how to you know build a community around what they're interested in solving. What words of advice would you have for them?
If like when I started building my community and these webinar series, I was a rookie. I did a lot of sales. Did a lot of product building beforehand, a lot of market research. One of my best decisions as a founder was to find someone, a content strategist, who actually a fractional content strategist. I didn't hire for someone like full time. I had a strategist. He's called Moti Alkheim. He lives in the US, by the way. I was particularly looking for someone in the US because I have this positive bias that advertising and the entire industry is the most advanced in the US. So I wanted to have someone from there. And he has like 20 plus years of experience in content led growth. And the reason I'm saying this is because I could tell him what my aims are, and I could lean back and take his suggestions, take his structure. He put out a content calendar in front of me, and he said, "Akash, this is now November. These are the 10 types of posts that we're going to do. This is the order that you're going to do them. Okay. These are the visuals that you're going to need. This is the reason we're doing that. And this is what we're going to achieve with this. These are the, okay, these are the posts. You do the webinars. Okay, Akash, here are the workflows. this is the newsletter per variation that you're going to send to people who registered and attended the meeting. And these are the ones that you're going to send. And a lot of times he also wrote me the text. My point being, having someone close to you whose advice you don't need to doubt, and that you can learn from, was the best decision for me, in a sense that I didn't go into any dead end streets. I didn't take bad turns in building up my content strategy, and building up the community. It's not a lot of money. With such an expert, I'm telling you, I worked a few hours a month. A few hours a month, he could produce all the structure that I needed, and then I did the posting. I ran the webinar. So operationally, I ran things, but it's just literally as if I was in like an Amazon warehouse, and I just had to pick the packages and put them in the right on the right shelf.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'll give it a shot myself. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I guess any other parting words for the audience?
Nobody wants to have the traveling salesman knocking on your door. And just think about your mailbox and all the cold emails that you get, just referring back to the IKEA brochure again. That's not how you can stay on top of your mind, on top of the mind, and that's also not how you build credibility with people. And content is something that it has a relatively low hurdle to get started with. You have to invest a bit of time, for sure. You have to invest time also in learning, not just in producing content, so you get better and better at it. But it's literally no money to start with a Medium or Substack account, and start writing, or start creating your first podcast like you're doing it, Sam. Putting it out, see the engagement, see who the first fans of yours are, engaging with them, and then building on this little nucleus.
Wonderful. And then, if someone wants to learn more about Airtime or connect with you, like, how can they do that?
The best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I have a very strange Hungarian name, but if you're looking for Akos, AKOS, Kiss, like KISS, there's a good chance you're going to find me on LinkedIn. And as far as Airtime is concerned, it's www at airtimeux.com. That's the easiest way, either through LinkedIn or go through our website. Check it out. You can also find all the webinar content out there. If you have a few spare minutes and you want to dig into some product and research topics.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. This has been super. It's been extremely enjoyable to talk with you. And yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know how to end a podcast. So,
Sam, it's my pleasure. It's been a great discussion,
everyone.
and
Thanks so much for listening. I edited this podcast episode in under 20 minutes with Katana. Katana is a free tool that I built that makes it really easy to turn raw Zoom recordings into good-looking video podcasts. All you have to do is upload a raw Zoom recording, that's the MP4 file, and Katana will then crop the faces and put it over a nicer looking background. The Katana app has a very simple Canva-like interface to change the borders, backgrounds, layouts, and otherwise get a professional looking video podcast with very little effort. It'll even automate adding name tags and call to actions just like the ones that you saw in this episode. If you are interested in doing your own podcast, Katana is probably the easiest tool to get something that looks pretty good pretty quickly. It's free. You can check it out at katana.video. If you have any issues using the tool, I will personally help you. Just reach out at sam@katana.video. If you like the episode, or if you just want to support me, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps me, it helps the podcast, and it helps Katana. Thank you so much.